Exodus chapter 33, verse 11? God talked to Moses as a man talks with a friend. James chapter 2, I think 23, Abraham, we're told, was a friend of God. Now, Aristotle thinks that's outrageous. Aristotle believed that the idea that you could be friends with a god was crazy. And the reason he said that was it was impossible to be friends with a god was because we didn't have enough in common. Now, what Aristotle is saying when he says you can't possibly be friends with a god, we don't have enough in common, Aristotle is giving us an idea of friendship which is right. C.S. Lewis was one of the best modern-day channelers of the ancient understanding of friendship in his book, The Four Loves. And at one place in The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis says, look, eros, which is, of course, romantic, erotic love, and philos, which is friendship love, in their essence, they're somewhat different. If you had to depict them, in eros, two people are looking at each other, adoring each other. But in philos, friendship, two people are side to side, shoulder to shoulder, and looking at something else. And C.S. Lewis says that friendships start with the explicit or implicit statement, you too? You love this painting too? You like this music too? You've had the same experience with your parents too? You see, friendship starts when there's two people looking at the same thing and they have it in common. You too? And that's the beginning of friendship. That's the beginning of the particular kind of intimacy that friendship brings. And that's what Aristotle's saying. Aristotle's saying you could never, no human being could ever look at a god and say, you too? How can you do that? Here's why it's possible. Here's why Aristotle, who's considerably smarter than not only me, but probably everybody else in this room, though there might be a couple outliers out there, in which case, 3,000 years from now, if the world goes on, they'll be talking about your writings. Aristotle was a smart guy, got this wrong. Here's why. Biblical theology. Almost every part of biblical theology shows us why friendship with God is possible. First of all, let's talk about the doctrine of God. We have a triune God. We have a God who's not unipersonal, one God, but three persons in that one God. He's tripersonal. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, who know and love each other and have been doing that throughout eternity, in which case you could actually say God, the triune God, is a friendship. Now, by the way, the doctrine of the Trinity is such that if you put too much emphasis on God's oneness or too much emphasis on God's threeness, you run into trouble. You don't do justice to the biblical material. So you have to always keep this in balance. But for the moment, I'm just going to look at the threeness. And St. Augustine, though, by the way, if he's ever criticized in his Trinitarian theology, he's often criticized for too much oneness, but nevertheless, Augustine pointed out that if we had a unipersonal God, a God who existed as a person, and then later on started to create angels or human beings or whatever. See, love is only possible between persons. And so if God starts as one person, then God would be power before he was love. In other words, he'd use his power to start create beings, and because he had beings, then he could enter into a relation with beings, and those beings, that would be love. But you see, as Augustine said, if God was unipersonal, then power would be primary and love would be secondary to God's being. But because we have a triune God, a God who is a friendship from all eternity, therefore, friendship, communication, love, relationship is primary. So the doctrine of God, God is a friendship. Secondly, the doctrine of creation. You and I are made in the image of God. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot. But again, let's just take a look at one thing. It means we're made in the image of a God who is a friendship. And therefore, I've been around when people have been dying. I've been a pastor for a long time. And I want you to know that I've never heard anybody say, as they were dying, oh, I wish I'd made more money. I wish I'd spent more time at work. I wish I had accrued more power. No, no, no. They always say, I wish I spent more time with my children. I wish I had done better with my friends. They're always saying, oh, relationships, relationships. Why? Because they're made in the image of God. And this God, because our God is triune, love, friendship, relationship is primary. And then there's the whole history of redemption. Do you know that the entire history of redemption, in a sense, is one gigantic cosmic act of friendship? First of all, God becomes a human being. God the Son becomes a human being. And you know what that means? What it says in Hebrews, he was made like us in every way except for sin. He was made like us in every way except for sin. So first of all, God knows what it's like to be human. God knows what it's like to live a life. But more than that, on the cross, John chapter 15, Jesus says, the greatest act of friendship possible is to lay down your life for your friends. No other God of any other major religion could possibly lay down his life for his friends, because no other God went through the first act of friendship, which is incarnation. I'm going to become like you. So I become vulnerable, I become mortal, I become killable. And then on the cross, what does Jesus do? He becomes like us, not just in our life, but in our death, in our darkness. In fact, on the cross, Jesus Christ becomes like us in our lostness. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? In our lostness. Oh, Aristotle, look. Look at Jesus Christ. Look at the Son of God crying, yelling, being betrayed, all the sorts of things that we go through, feeling cut off from God. And now you can look up at Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and you can say, you too? See? So Aristotle's wrong. It's possible to be friends with God. Every single aspect of biblical theology tells you that's possible. Or another way to put it is, every single aspect of biblical theology makes it possible for us to be friends with God.